Hi, welcome to today's community chat. I'm Sarah Goode, and we are going to be here with Kelsey Mohring from United Way of South Hampton Roads. We're going to be speaking about their 100-year celebration, what their programs offer in our community, and partner organizations, and more. So, Kelsey, thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Thanks for having me.
I was there with you all last week celebrating the centennial, but that's a huge accomplishment and obviously shows the longevity of your organization. So if you just want to give us a little information, I'm sure everyone's heard of United Way down here, but in case they haven't, just what you all do.
Yeah, so United Way, obviously we've been around for 100 years. And our mission is really to bring people and resources together to solve big problems in our community. So we like to look at the real root causes of issues and look at problems that are so big that we really need multiple people around the table to solve them. So we're looking at things like poverty, homelessness, food security, and for us that really focuses on the building blocks of self-sufficiency, which we consider to be health, education, and economic mobility or income. And so that's really where we focus our efforts, and that has changed over time because we really believe in adapting to kind of what the community needs are at that time. And so over 100 years that has changed as the times have changed, but the way in which we do that has always been about collaboration and working with community partners.
And a lot of what you all do, and you just said it in your pillars, but mobile mentoring, helping people more long term, and then also you all do help with short term. So I'm going to ask later about helping with the tornado and different things that pop up in our area. But I wanted to start. Is there a little history that you can give us, or sort of talk to us about the beginning, maybe of United Way?
Yeah. So obviously we started in 1923, and we started as the Community Fund, and our name has changed multiple times over the years, but it was always about collecting community funds and then distributing them to nonprofits across the community. And so during World War II, we actually became the War Fund, and we were supporting those who were serving overseas. In the 80s, we were collecting funds and distributing them to organizations that were fighting AIDS. And so it's always been this common thread of responding to the needs at that time. And then about 20 years ago, I think, is when we adopted the name United Way of South Hampton Roads. And so we cover all of the South Side. So that's Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Suffolk, Isle of Wight, Chesapeake, and Portsmouth. And so that's a little bit of the history, that 100 years that we have been here and have been serving the community during that time.
Absolutely. And I think that is one thing that I asked about off camera before we started, but changing with the times is so important, and there's different issues obviously that come up, but there's different ways to tackle issues obviously than when you all first started. And I think the thing I was most I guess overcome with emotion by last week especially was, hearing from these people in these programs like WAVY Thrive or mobile mentoring that are very hands-on, and they are helping people, so I guess entrenched in their life. It's not just a it's a one-stop shop for everything, for helping them with education or whatever their goal is. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about that? I know WAVY Thrive that was started, it was 2020, but that program, it seems to really help, I think it's at 50,000 families. That is quite a lot of, people in Hampton Roads.
Yeah, so, our model has always been about, obviously we want to help those who are most in need, and so we look at those who are in poverty and who are facing crisis, and we want to be there to support them. But then there's also this other population of people that we call ALICE, and that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. And these are people who are working oftentimes multiple jobs, and they're making too much to qualify for government assistance, but usually not enough to really provide for the basic needs of life. And so they're caught in that kind of gap between assistance and self-sufficiency. And what we know is that if we're able to kind of keep those people out of poverty, or kind of overcome some of those challenges that can happen, it's much easier to keep them out of poverty than to get people out of poverty, right? And so for those people, though, oftentimes they're one crisis away from slipping into poverty. So something like a health crisis or a car breaking down or the loss of a job can really kind of throw off that delicate balance. And so over the last few years, we've really been focusing on that population and trying to provide as much support as we can to that group of people. And so VB Thrive was really designed to address that group. And so that 50,000 population is really the Alice population in Virginia Beach. And so VB Thrive is meant to work with those families. The goal is 4,000 over 3 years. And to provide that wraparound support and mentoring and coaching to work with them to reach self-sufficiency. And so when people come into that program, we sit down with them and do a full assessment of all these aspects of their life. And so they sit down and talk to us about what's their transportation look like, their child care, their mental health and physical health, their income, their education, and do this whole analysis for them. And then we talk about where they want to be. And so they set their own goals on where do they really want to see themselves get to, what do they define as success and self-sufficiency, and then walk alongside them as they try to plot that path. We can connect them to resources across the community, get them connected to our partners, provide gap funding in certain areas or some incentives to help them move along that path. And what we find is that by providing that much higher level of support and more of that wraparound support where we're really not just giving them a handout but a hand up, they really reach a much deeper level of stability and self-sufficiency that becomes much more lasting.
And are those with organization partners, in the community that help you with that education piece, that help you with maybe that economic side?
Yes, so we work with a large group of partners. We have a couple of lead partners that we work with that help us with the mentoring aspect of that. So we're working with the Independence Center, we're working with Urban League, we're working with Catholic Charities, the Virginia Beach Community Development Center. But then we also have a number of other partners that we're working with to provide some of those resources. So Hampton Roads Workforce Council is one of those. But we're able to kind of pull all of those different levers and those pieces together to provide all of those wraparound supports and get those participants the support that they need.
Right, and talk about, what a crucial time right now it is for that, because so many people feel like they're in that middle sliver, whether it's inflation, the housing crisis, all the different issues with, food pricing. I think a lot of people I've spoken with this year in terms of whether it's housing or for kids or food banks, it's been that part of the population that might not be able to get assistance from some programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a lot of the Alice population, COVID was kind of that crisis that knocked them off their feet, and they haven't gotten back up. For some people, COVID was the thing that required them to then go into debt. They put their mortgage or they put different things on credit cards, and so now they're dealing with that, and that becomes kind of a long-term issue that they're facing. And so we are seeing the long-term effects of that, and it does just seem like things are a little bit harder now with inflation and certainly with the housing crisis. The cost of housing has gone up significantly. Finding lower cost housing is a real challenge. Finding access to mental health is a real challenge right now. And so anybody who's even seeking mental health help is really having challenges there. And so it just seems like getting the support that you need and getting access to things is a little bit more challenging than it used to be. So by having a mentor and a coach that can walk alongside you and help remove some of those barriers, we find that these participants are a lot more successful.
And is the mobile mentoring, is that also part of VB Thrive, or is that a separate sort of group?
So the mobility mentoring is the approach that we use with this program. And we use it across a lot of our programs, actually. We have a number of different programs that use that mobility mentoring program that actually comes out of Boston. It's a approach that we found out of this group called Empath in Boston, and we just really liked the practice, and so we have applied it here and just find it to be really successful. And so that's the mentoring approach that we use with coaching, with goal setting, incentive based. And it's all about focusing on the participant and their goals. So it's very different from the traditional case management model where you have kind of a prescribed path that you put them on and you have to check boxes and things like that. With mobility mentoring, it's very much participant driven. And so they tell you what success looks like to them, they set their goals, and they lead that process.
And are you still offering, for VB Thrive? Can people apply online? Is that still available?
Yeah, absolutely. We are definitely accepting participants. Really excited to be. We still have that program going for at least another year and a half. Really appreciate the city's support of that programming. We got ARPA funding for that, and so people can go to vbthrive.org if they're interested in applying, and we'd love to get them connected.
And just for anyone watching, there is some B-roll playing of the celebration last week, but also of the VB Thrive. I think it's from the opening day of that office, so you can see little aspects of what we're speaking about in video here in the conversation. I wanted to ask you, just because it's so relevant from, I guess just last week, which is hard to believe, but, with the tornado, you all stepped into action very quickly. Is that something where, whether it's COVID, whether it's another natural disaster here, you all do want to target a problem that is going to affect a lot of people in this area?
Yeah, so one of the things that I am most proud of about United Way is that we want to be there where we are needed, and we really act as that safety net for the nonprofit community. And so we step up when we are asked to. We never want to step into a situation where we're not needed or where we're not wanted, and so we always wait to be asked. But we, offer our support as soon as we can. As soon as I woke up the next morning, I was reaching out to the city manager and the superintendent and all of that to just offer our support if needed. And we've been able to step up for hurricanes and tornadoes and shootings, unfortunately, just to support our community and be a fiscal agent when needed for funds if that becomes something that is appropriate, where we need to do some fundraising to support victims or to support other areas of need. And that's just a real point of pride for us in terms of being able to quickly respond to needs, particularly during COVID. I think, nonprofits were really hit hard during COVID, and so our ability to respond really, really quickly during the first few months of COVID to raise funds and to be able to get that to the nonprofits on the front lines was something that was really critical. And obviously, standing alongside the city of Virginia Beach during the shooting that they experienced most recently with the city of Chesapeake. When they experienced a shooting, we opened a Hope and Healing Fund that we actually just recently released the funding from to support agencies that are doing work in mental health and violence prevention. So, we really like to step up in areas of highest need and in crisis to make sure that the community knows that we are there to support them.
And I'm sure over 100 years, there's been a lot of different, events or crises that, have occurred. But, looking forward now to, the next 100 or at least the next few years, are there things that you all are trying to develop or trying to focus on, trying to focus efforts on?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, those pillars of health, education, and economic mobility are really our driving focus. And so VB Thrive is obviously continuing for the next year and a half at least, but I hope that is really kind of a foundation for us as we continue to grow that programming. We're getting ready to launch a Norfolk Thrive program in Norfolk, which will be similarly created. And so a little bit different and a little bit of a smaller program, but very similar in terms of the model of mobility mentoring. And I hope that we're able to kind of use the learnings and the data from that to then be able to take that to other cities. Same thing with the Hope and Healing funding. The design of that was that we would really focus the first round of funding on programs in Chesapeake. that are focused on violence prevention and mental health, but then that we would be able to use whatever best practices we get from those programs and then take those to other cities. And so I do anticipate, mental health being a real focus for us over the next few years in our health pillar. Education has always been a big passion of ours, and so we are continuing to expand that. Norfolk has been kind of our hub for the past few years, but we've really been expanding into Virginia Beach and Chesapeake recently. We've been in Suffolk for a number of years, but Chesapeake and Virginia Beach have been a real focus area for expansion lately. And so I think continuing to work on those efforts. Third grade reading is a real focus for us in early childhood education, because we know that those are real important targets, getting children that really good early start. And then we know that third grade reading level is just really important in terms of if they're reading on track by third grade, we know that they have a much better success rate in terms of graduation and being successful later on. And so focusing our efforts in kind of those early years is something that we plan on doing for the next few years. And so just a lot of exciting things on the horizon in terms of programming and partnerships, and lots of work to do, but a lot of exciting things ahead.
And you all, help families, you help individuals. I think, with the VB Thrive, that's more family and individual focused, but thank you for bringing up, the reading, because you do work with a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And one thing I did want to ask you about before we wrap up here is for Something in the Water, and that was a highlight that you all shared last week, but, offering and helping with scholarships for people, whether they're, looking to go to college or looking to go back to school later on. Can you just talk a little bit about that partnership?
Yeah. So we were lucky enough to receive a really generous grant from USAA. And so for the last couple of years, we have been doing this STEM scholarship program that focuses on Black students, because the data shows that there is a real discrepancy in Black students, and particularly Black females in STEM fields. And so in order to kind of work on advancing that, we are focusing on scholarships for those students. And so we've issued over 270 awards to those students, and so really excited, and their stories are just really awesome. It's these just neat students who are doing incredible things and studying, things like neuroscience and physics and all sorts of great things, and just have bright futures ahead of them. And so we were excited to partner with Something in the Water to highlight that. And all of the scholarship recipients, because of our partnership with Something in the Water, we were able to add some additional funding and also partner with Centera to add some funding. And so all of them are getting an additional $3,000 this coming fall for their education. And so an exciting program, and the application for the next round of that is actually currently open. So unitedwayshr.org/STEM. If you are a student or a veteran and you're interested in pursuing a degree in STEM, you can apply there.
Great, and I can share that link on WAVY.com as well. But the extra $3,000, I mean, especially with some of the increases in college education right now that we're seeing, like that goes a long way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Kelsey, is there anything else that you wanted to highlight? I didn't want to, overtake your time, but I have time. So if you have anything else that you want to share, programs right now that you all are, working on.
The only other one I didn't mention is our program for veterans. So obviously we have a huge veteran population here, and near and dear to our heart. And so we have a program called Mission United, and we really had to kind of pivot that program over COVID to respond to the needs at that time. And so we've spent a lot of time over the past 6 months redeveloping that network. And so excited to be relaunching that. It is a coordinated care network for service members, active duty veterans, and their families. So it's a real one-stop shop. If you are in need of assistance, you can call our Mission United hotline or fill out an application online, and we can connect you to a myriad of different services through our partners. And so we use an online system so that it makes it really easy, so that you don't have to kind of just call a bunch of different people, and we can walk you through that process. And so our goal there is really just to kind of provide that coordination and make that process easier for those who have served our country. And so excited to be relaunching that with a real focus on particularly childcare and mental health, because a lot of the research that we've been doing recently has shown that those are some areas of need in our community for that population. So looking to do some partnerships around that, but that was the only one I missed.
Thank you. No, that's, I mean, super important to this area, obviously, but just in general, and that's great that, you know, with maybe some COVID era, you know, issues, maybe not being a problem anymore, but maybe taking a step back and you can focus more on some other programs.
Yeah.
That's
Dig
great.
back
Well,
in.
Kelsey, thank you so much for joining
Thank you.
us. And then everything will be up on wavy.com if you're watching, with links and different, you know, sources of information for what Kelsey and I spoke about today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.